My name is Bonnie, and at 30 years old, I had just signed the final papers when I stepped onto the deck of my brand new home in Nag's Head. The ocean breeze carried the sharp bite of salt from the Atlantic, the kind of air that clung to your skin and promised freedom. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe like the air finally belonged to me. The house itself wasn't anything flashy. Weathered shingles, big windows, and a view of the dunes curving toward the water. But it was mine. Every nail, every wall, every inch of it came from years of quiet hard work. It was my declaration that I no longer had to live under anyone else's shadow. Before I could even set the deed folder down, the phone rang. Marcella's name lit up my screen. My sister's voice came sharp and commanding, leaving no pause for me to respond. We'll be there in 3 hours with 26 of my in-laws. Clear the rooms, prepare meals for everyone. We're staying 2 weeks. Her words weren't a request. They were an order, spoken as if the house had always belonged to her. I stood in the empty living room, the sunlight from the ocean spilling across the bare floorboards, and felt a familiar tightening in my chest. I knew that tone. I had grown up under it, bent by it, trained to keep silent while she barked instructions that our parents always rushed to obey. Still, I didn't answer right away. I let her voice echo in walls that had never known her, never sheltered her. This house was mine, paid for with my effort, my savings, my name on the deed. Outwardly, I stayed calm, my tone even when I finally said, "I hear you, Marcella." Inside, though, something different stirred, an ache mixed with a steel I hadn't felt in years. I ended the call and looked out at the horizon, the restless waters still steady. 3 hours, that's what she had given me, and I already knew it was enough. Standing in the quiet of my beach house, memories pulled me backward to Raleigh, where Marcella and I first learned who we were expected to be. She was fire, demanding, certain the world owed her the seat at the head of the table. And me, I was patience. I smoothed over rough edges, kept silent when silence was the only way to keep peace. Our parents encouraged it without even realizing. They praised her boldness, excused her tantrums, and leaned on me to be the steady one who never caused trouble. I remember birthday dinners where she demanded the biggest slice of cake, and my parents laughed while handing it to her. I remember school projects she bragged about not doing, while I stayed up late finishing them, too tired to complain. By high school, the pattern was cemented. Marcella pushed. I gave way. She ordered. I delivered. And when our parents passed away years later, nothing changed. If anything, it grew stronger. She seized the estate, acting as though she alone carried the family name. Relatives deferred to her. I became the quiet sibling, the one who never fought, the one people assumed would agree. Whenever I questioned her, she twisted it back on me, making me sound selfish or weak, and everyone nodded along. I sank so far into that role that I almost forgot the quiet resentment building inside me. That call in my beach house wasn't new. It was the same voice that had dictated my life since childhood, expecting me to fall in line. But this time, the waves outside told me things had shifted. That deed wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that I had stepped out of her shadow. I could almost see us as children again. Marcella stamping her foot, me folding my hands to hide the trembling. But here in Nag's Head, fear wasn't what filled me. It was a calm determination I'd never felt before. The sense that I could finally decide the part one wanted to play. And with 3 hours ahead of me, I had already begun to choose. When our parents died, I thought grief might soften Marcella, that loss might teach her to share. Instead, it gave her more room to tighten her grip. The estate might have been split on paper, but in practice, she spoke as if it all belonged to her. She carried herself like royalty, an heir without crown or consent. Relatives bowed, neighbors deferred, and I stayed quiet longer than I should have. The family farm in Johnston County was the first to go. My father's pride, acres of soybeans and corn stretching to the horizon. I wanted to keep it, maybe lease it so the land stayed alive. Marcella insisted on selling. Too much work, she said, though she had never worked it a single day. Within months, it was gone, sold to developers and flattened for subdivisions. Then came the house in Raleigh, Our childhood room still held a faint cedar scent from the closets. I suggested restoring it, maybe even living there while we figured things out. Marcella brought in contractors within weeks, tearing down walls, gutting the rooms. By the time she was finished, it was unrecognizable. Our memories erased like stains. I stood by as each decision passed, my protests brushed away with a laugh or a sharp word. She called it practical. I knew better, it was control. The same control she had held over me my whole life. Piece by piece, what should have been shared was swallowed by her certainty. But this beach house? This was supposed to be different. It wasn't inherited, wasn't tied to our past. This house was mine, bought with years of long shifts at Duke Regional, of saving, of living. I had lived frugally while others assumed I owned nothing. To me, this house was a fresh start, a place beyond Marcella's reach. But her phone call reminded me she never needed a deed to stake her claim. Entitlement was always her weapon. And now, with the Atlantic spread outside my window and just 3 hours left, I knew I couldn't let the past repeat itself. I sensed the trap the second I hung up. If I told Marcella no outright, it would unfold the same way it always had. She'd raise her voice, twist my refusal into cruelty, and by the time the shouting ended, I'd be painted as ungrateful or selfish. That had been our pattern. Her demanding, me defending, and everyone else agreeing with her version of events. But this home wasn't shared property. It was mine, legally mine. I couldn't let her turn it into another battlefield where I walked away the loser. Not this time. I wouldn't fight on her terms. I pulled out the folder I'd kept since the closing, flipping through the notes I had scribbled in the margins. While buying, I had gathered contacts, local services, management companies, resources in case I ever decided to rent the place out seasonally. Back then, I saw them as options for later. Now, they were tools for survival. I dialed a property manager in Nag's Head, explained I needed the house filled immediately, and asked if he had tenants ready. He did, tourists waiting for a sudden opening, willing to pay above market for a last-minute stay. We moved forward with the contract. Next, I called a catering company in Kill Devil Hills, arranging food delivery for that evening. Finally, I contacted a moving crew, requesting they be on standby in case I needed help with linens or furniture. With every call, a steady calm settled over me. I wasn't frantic or rushing. I was measured, intentional, as if every silent year had been leading me here. Marcella had given me 3 hours. That was enough. When I set the phone down, the house seemed to brace itself with me. The ocean beyond the windows sounded less like a threat, more like a promise. For once, I wasn't waiting for her storm to pass. I was preparing for it. I moved slowly from room to room, brushing my hand along the bare walls, grounding myself. The house was still empty of furniture, free of photographs, a blank canvas waiting for my choices. I paused in the master bedroom, picturing the view Marcella would have seized for herself, barking orders as the rest fell into line. The thought didn't fill me with dread anymore. It sharpened my resolve. Within an hour, the property manager called back. A family from Virginia Beach had been desperate for a 2-week rental. They would arrive that evening and had already wired a deposit, higher than market, for the last-minute booking. His tone carried surprise and respect when I accepted without hesitation. I heard his keyboard clacking as he finalized the contract. He promised the house would be ready and he'd personally oversee the handoff. I hung up and stepped into the kitchen. The counters gleamed, empty, except for my folder and the stack of papers I had carried from Raleigh. From the envelope, I pulled out photocopies of withdrawals Marcella had made from the family trust, transactions written under my name back when I was too drained to fight. I remembered coming home from Duke Regional after double shifts, reeking of disinfectant and exhaustion, while she quietly bled the accounts I had helped build. I slid those papers into the fireproof safe, hidden in the closet. They weren't just records, they were proof. Proof I hadn't imagined the theft. Proof that my silence had cost me. I wasn't ready to use them, not yet. But knowing they were secured gave me strength, steadier than the deed or the locked door. When I turned the key in the safe, the house felt different, less fragile, more fortified. The rooms no longer seemed exposed. They felt prepared. And so was I. The hum of distant tires on the highway warned me time was slipping. Then headlights pierced the drive as the first car pulled in, just as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Soon, more followed, a caravan of minivans and SUVs crowding the curb, spilling families into the sand path toward the porch. Doors slammed. Voices rose. Children dashed forward as though the house was already theirs. Marcella emerged from the lead car like a commander taking ground. She didn't knock, didn't pause. She launched straight into giving orders, pointing upstairs for luggage, waving toward the kitchen for their groceries. Her in-laws moved like soldiers on cue, hauling coolers and bags without even glancing at me. To them, the house was theirs for 2 weeks, and I was nothing more than the doorman holding the key. I stood in the entryway, calm, steady. Years ago, I would have rushed forward to help, to smooth things over, to make myself useful so I wouldn't make waves. Not now. I waited, watching as Marcella barked instructions. Get the kids upstairs, leave the wine on the counter. Bonnie, where are the spare linens? Her eyes flicked past me, already measuring which room she'd take. The biggest, of course, the one with the ocean view. It was the same expression she'd worn as a child, stamping her foot until our parents surrendered the better toy. The larger slice, the louder praise. Don't unload, I said at last, my voice even but firm. The words fell heavy, rippling through the room like a stone dropped in still water. For the first time since we'd arrived, everything went still. Suitcases froze midair. A cooler shifted awkwardly in someone's grip. Marcella spun around, disbelief flashing across her face before hardening into annoyance. What do you mean, don't unload? This is the house. We're here. I met her gaze without flinching. Not tonight, Marcella. The silence stretched, taut as a rope about to snap. In that stillness, I could feel the evening begin to turn. Marcella's eyes narrowed. Her voice sliced through the heavy pause. What are you talking about? Of course, we're unloading. Everyone's exhausted from the drive. She snapped at one of the cousins, motioning him toward the stairs. I stayed rooted. The house is booked, I said, steady as the tide outside. Paying guests arrive tonight. You'll need to put everything back in the cars. For a beat, no one moved, as if my words were in a foreign tongue. Then confusion rippled through them. In-laws shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other, their coolers suddenly heavy in their arms. One cousin muttered under his breath, we didn't know. Right then, the property manager appeared at the end of the drive, clipboard in hand, shirt crisp, stride brisk. He greeted me first, then turned to Marcella with professional calm. Ma'am, this property has been reserved. 2 weeks paid in advance at above market rate. I'm here to prepare for the renter's arrival. Whispers grew louder, embarrassment spreading across faces that moments ago had been laughing. Marcella's expression twisted, shock colliding with outrage. This is absurd. We're your family. Strangers don't come before us. I let the silence stretch before I answered. This isn't a family hostel. It's an investment, one I worked for, one I own, and one that begins paying for itself tonight. A line had been drawn, and everyone saw it. Some in-laws avoided my eyes. Others stepped back toward their vehicles, sliding from her side into neutrality. Her entourage's strength faltered. The certainty she wore like armor began to crack. Marcella looked around, waiting for someone to echo her anger. But the crowd behind her wasn't united anymore. It was splintering, loyalty dissolving into awkward silence. Her face flushed as she turned back to me, her voice rising, desperate to regain ground. But I had already set the stage. Marcella's fury sharpened, her voice pitched enough to cut glass. I reached into the folder I'd carried from Raleigh and pulled out a plain envelope thick with papers, holding it out between us. She hesitated, suspicion flickering before she snatched it. Her bravado faltered as she flipped through the pages, bank records, trust withdrawals, each stamped with her signature beside mine, years of siphoning disguised as management. I had kept them quietly, waiting for the moment when silence would stop being weakness and become a weapon. Her hands trembled as the papers rattled in the breeze. Rage twisted across her face, but beneath it I saw something sharper, fear. For once, her control wasn't absolute. If you ever touch this house, I said evenly, every dollar you stole becomes public record, court, community, everyone. I won't stay silent again. A hush blanketed the driveway. One in-law I barely recognized shifted, then took two children by the hand, guiding them back to the car. His eyes met mine briefly, an apology that wasn't his to give. The sound of a car door closing punctured the tension, reminding everyone this wasn't a family gathering. It was a reckoning. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, but the force was gone. Her audience was thinning, her power unraveling. I stood firm, letting her see the calm she couldn't shake. She clutched the envelope, desperate and cornered, her fury no longer landing as it once did. The silence around us wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to everyone watching her stumble. Relatives edged back toward their cars. Engines turned over one by one as the caravan began to unravel. Doors slammed. Muffled voices floated across the street, fragments about Marcella's arrogance, her habit of taking too much for granted. The crowd that had arrived with such noise and certainty now scattered in quiet retreat, each step away chipping at the authority she had worn like armor. Marcella stood frozen in the driveway, gripping the envelope as though it might vanish if she let go. Her voice broke as she called after them, trying to gather them back under her command. But they kept moving, eyes down, unwilling to return. Children were buckled into cars, coolers shoved hastily into trunks. One by one, the vehicles pulled away from the house she had assumed was hers to claim. As the last of the caravan disappeared, the caterers arrived, vans unloading trays of food for guests who would actually appreciate them. Movers carried in fresh linens, their steps sure and practiced, resetting the house not for family but for paying tenants. The transition was seamless, as if Marcella's invasion had been nothing but a brief disturbance in the tide. She screamed then, a raw sound cracking in the open air, rage, humiliation, disbelief spilling into the afternoon light with no one left to catch it. Her power had evaporated. Her audience was gone. She was exposed in a way I had never seen. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence weighed more than her shouting ever could. I had drawn the line, and this time it held. When I closed the door, the house seemed to exhale with me, already turning toward the quiet I had earned. That night, I carried a chair onto the deck and let the sound of the waves wash over me. The sand shimmered pale in the moonlight, the Atlantic restless but steady, a rhythm older than anything Marcella or I had ever fought over. Above me, the stars stretched sharp and wide, unbothered by the noise of the day. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing down, no shadow across my steps. I thought of the girl I had been, the one who yielded, who swallowed her words so Marcella's could carry. That girl had walked behind her sister in Raleigh kitchens and crowded schoolyards, always smoothing the path, always absorbing the sting. For decades, I mistook patience for weakness, silence for safety. But sitting there with salt air on my face, I finally understood. I had never been weak. I had been waiting. The house around me wasn't just wood, glass, and paint. It was proof that years of double shifts, frugal choices, and quiet resolve had built something solid. It was a line drawn in cedar and stone, a reminder I could claim space without apology. Marcella's voice no longer filled the night. Her demands, her certainty, her entitlement had slipped into the past, and with them went the part of me that had always bent. I leaned back, listening to the ocean's endless rhythm, and felt the key warm in my pocket. The deed was mine. More than that, so was the story. This house was not just an investment. It was my declaration. I would never again be erased.